Note-taking study guide, page 94, Building a National Unity. Please be on page 214 as well of your textbook, as we'll be referencing that during the lecture. After the War of 1812, there began a period called the Era of Good Feeling. President Monroe basically ran unopposed. The first time he won most electoral college votes, and the second time he ran unopposed at all. There was a general feeling of national identity, nationalism, national unity. There were three kind of regions, and if you look on page 215 of your textbook, you'll see that there was kind of the North, West, and South. And these regions were represented by three different people. The first is Henry Clay, and he was a congressman from Kentucky who represented Western interests. So when you think about the Western interests, this would be like trade, this would be building canals to help with farmers get their goods to the east and south. This was the guy that was going to try to do that. He also proposed an American system where he would try to unify all of the sections of America through canals, and later when railroads came into being, that was what he was trying to go for. The second person was John C. Calhoun, and this person was from South Carolina. He represented Southern interests. So think, unfortunately, slavery, and states' rights. Okay, he emphasized the idea of states' rights. Okay, and the third person was Daniel Webster. He was from Massachusetts. He represented Northern interests, and he emphasized the idea of high tariffs. And take a moment. If you look on page 215, there's three different quotes by Daniel Webster, John C. Calhoun, and Henry Clay on right next to the map. Just take the time and look at those real quick and kind of answer in your head the question they have there as well. During the era of good feelings, it doesn't mean that everything was great and the economy was booming. There were still problems with the economy just like we have today. One of the issues they had was the first bank, National Bank of America, the charter had ceased to exist, and because Congress hadn't renewed this charter. So state banks were making too many loans, there was too much, so the price, there was inflation, and there was actually a rise in prices, okay, as a result. So they issued the second Bank of the United States, okay, and why it was needed is state banks made too many loans and issued too much money. And what it did is it loans money and controlled the money supply, just like our Federal Reserve kind of does today. So the tariff of 1816, and why it was needed is British manufacturers were dumping goods which hurt American business. And what dumping means is that they basically flood the system with so much of it that the price of their particular product goes down, and people start buying their product. Okay, what it did is it raised taxes or tariffs on foreign goods, pleasing Northerners and obviously upsetting Southerners. Okay, so you're seeing again this rift between North and South, which we'll get to when we'll study more in depth when we get to the Civil War. Okay, and as I mentioned earlier, you have Henry Clay, who had proposed the American system. The American system never really came into being. The idea was that there would be high tariffs, and then the money that the government made from those tariffs or taxes would be used into infrastructure projects that would eventually mean it so that it would be easier for the different regions to trade with each other. And but the South opposed tariffs, and so it never really came into being. During this era of good feeling, there was also three kind of Supreme Court cases that helped build up the power of the federal government. Also, it helped the economy a little bit. But there was three kind of cases. The first is McCulloch versus Maryland in 1819. The question was, can Maryland tax a state branch and the second branch of the United States? So the second branch of the Bank of the United States was a federal bank. Can Maryland tax that? And the decision from the Supreme Court was you cannot interfere with taxes of federal institutions or violate federal laws. So basically it enforced, based on the Constitution, the fact that federal law supersedes or is above state law. Okay. The second one is Dartmouth versus Woodward, 1819. This one was, can New Hampshire change the charter of Dartmouth College? Okay, Dartmouth College is a private business. Can the state of New Hampshire just basically change it? Okay, and the decision is the charter was a private contract protected by the Constitution, meaning that businesses are private contracts, and states or federal government can't come in and just change a charter unless there's some kind of constitutional amendment that allows that. This third one is Gibson versus Ogden, 1824. The question is, can New York State grant a steamship company a monopoly? So New York State had built canals, and there was a steamship company, and they basically were giving that steamship, preferential treatment, and so they have a monopoly, meaning they control most of the market. Okay. The decision was the ferry trip involved interstate commerce, which only Congress can regulate. Now, this steamship company wasn't just in New York. If it was just within the New York State borders, then New York could have basically regulated that themselves. But because this steamship company went across state borders, it's now interstate commerce, two states, between states. And so the Congress has the power to regulate that, not states. And so all three of these kind of Supreme Court decisions increase the power of the federal government and decrease the power of the states. And that's a kind of a trend that we've seen from this time basically all the way up until today. You have this kind of trend towards federal government has more power, state governments have less.